Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. Today we're going over 5 rogue decks you should consider playing in the August 2022 format. We have about a month until Zenkai series officially releases, so maybe you guys want to try a little bit different style, try a different deck. These are decks that I would recommend to you guys to try out, and these are less just like my recommendations based purely on what I enjoy and more so based on metadata. Most of these decks have actually done very, very well in this format. This format's been a weird one in the sense that we have a defined triangle, but rogue decks end up placing highly or winning out more often than the actual triangle decks do. So we're gonna talk about that in today's video. If you guys are new here though, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. And if you guys want to help support the channel, there are many ways to do so down in the description as always. But today guys, if you want to help support the channel and you want to buy into cards we talk about in today's video, or any trading cards for that matter, consider using my link in the description to TCG Player. It really does help out a lot. Anyways, let's jump right into things. And the first thing I want to talk about is King Piccolo. So a little bit of a journey as far as aggro is concerned in Dragon Ball Super. We're all very used to Dragon Ball Super being a very aggressive game if you've been here for several years or so. But aggro's taken this journey where it was the best playstyle by far for a long time, and even the best aggro decks, including King Piccolo, could play these super elongated games because in KP's case, you had crazy draw power from Piano and the Piccolo Jr. unison, you had infinite ability to flood a board whenever you wanted to during both players' turns, and you had great defensive red cards. Obviously, you still have the good defensive red cards. They typically don't ban defensive cards in this game, but King Piccolo has saw many hits that have kind of turned it into a glass cannon style aggro deck, and I think that's where an aggro deck like this should be. It has very good potential to put crazy pressure and maybe even win the game by turn 3, but if the game goes much longer than that, you're going to notice the deck start to fall off a cliff. Like, it gets really rough after a while. And again, I think that's a good spot for this to be. I think that aggro in Ultimate Squad format and maybe in a little bit of Realm of the Gods format has been lacking, just meaning like we don't have the same aggro we've been used to seeing over the game's history. But I do think that it's a much more healthy spot. If you have really strong potential to do a lot of damage by turn 3, and again, even possibly win by turn 3, being a glass cannon aggro deck is probably where you should be, and King Piccolo definitely falls into that spot. Still been doing okay in this format, and one reason I really want to recommend it is because King Piccolo is going to be very interesting going into Zenkai, because one, we're getting the green King Piccolo deck, which in many ways resembles the red King Piccolo deck, but there are even some ways where you can mix and match and play some of the green stuff in red King Piccolo. One card is A Demon is Born. This is a counter attack. Negate the attack, then play up to 1 red or green demon clan with energy cost of 3 or less from your drop with its skills negated for the turn. And then permanent, if you lose a KP card and you have 3 or more Z energy, you can activate this card's counter skill by paying 1 of any color instead of the 2 green that it costs. So you can recycle your 1 of Drum, which is kind of cool. It won't be a barrier blocker the turn you play it by this card's effect, but it will be a barrier blocker every turn after that. So kind of an interesting one to pick up if you never got the chance to play KP, if you want to play something more aggressive in this format that's a lot more mid-rangey and control-y, and you want to kind of get ready for Zenkai. I think King Piccolo is a great one to do that with. For another aggro pick, I want to talk about Masked Saiyan Reboot. So this one all started when my friend Sawyer kind of put this deck on the map at the New Jersey Edison event. He placed it very highly with this in the top 4, and it actually had a pretty solid showing this past weekend. It was one of the more popular decks too at the core TCG regional from the data that we had there, link in the description of that video. But Masked Saiyan, I mean, fills a very similar role to KP. They're actually very similar, even though this is more of like a rainbow deck and KP is a mono red deck. So basically what Bardock is doing is you're free playing the battle cards from the Vegeta starter deck. So you have Time Agent Vegeta, you have Time Agent Trunks, and you have the Supreme Kai of Time combo card. You have the cards that came in the Masked Saiyan starter deck, which is the 1-drop yellow black Masked Saiyan that's basically a dual attacker. You've got the dual attacking blue Masked Saiyan that says your opponent can either bottom deck a life to prevent it from being played or let it enter play. So you've got some really crazy cheap or free aggression like that. You've got your Overwhelms, of course, and then you've got all the good Black Saiyan support that we know the game has, like your 1 of Gogeta Thwarting the Dark Empire, which is very recyclable with a card like SS4 Goku Beyond All Limits. So between that, the deck is very good, but again, it definitely falls into that glass cannon aggro shell because you can put on crazy pressure in the first 3 turns. You even have potential to win the game by turn 3, but you're taking a lot of life with this deck. So at any point, like on a turn 3 or turn 4, if you don't quite get there to kill the opponent, the clapback potential is very, very real. But again, that trade-off is very, very fair for a deck that can put on such insane pressure, such as Mass Saiyan Reboot can do. Honestly though, I'm really, really happy that this deck is seeing a lot more representation, a lot more play. I think we do really need to find more aggressive decks in the meta to kind of keep the control decks at bay, and I think that Mass Saiyan is a very, very good deck at doing that. The good old classic, you know, leader has crit, combo a Champa, big double strike crit that your opponent probably can't combo out of early in the game, I think is a very, very fun theme. And again, I'm glad that aggro is kind of just rolling back into the meta. And we're gonna talk about the last 3 decks, guys, but real quick, just want to give myself a little bit of a shout out. I am publishing my own comic book, New Mafia Genesis. If you guys want to hear more about that, please go down in the description to my Indiegogo campaign link. You guys can see the synopsis there. I'm going to be posting some concept art very, very soon, so you guys can see what that's going to look like. Super, super excited about this project. Just wanted to give it a little shout out. Anyways, let's get into the next deck, which is Turles. Turles has been wreaking havoc on the format in the last 2 weeks. Did exceptionally well at Gen Con, finishing 2nd place. My teammate Scott taking the deck all the way with the blue-yellow variant, and it managed to win a best of 128 player online regional just this past weekend. Turles is incredibly, incredibly good. I talked about it a lot in the meta breakdown, but basically I think when you look at yellow decks, Sin Shenron has kind of fallen off the map, and the main reason for that is because the 9-drop Sin is so answerable. I still think there's some cool stuff you can do with aggro Sin. I talked about that in the last Rogue video. But as far as like the top 2 yellow contenders go, we have Yellow Trunks, which is one of the 3 in the meta triangle. That deck obviously plays just good generic yellow cards, but also has its own engine of 1-drop evolving battle cards that offer you a lot of value. Those cards are very, very good. Turles doesn't have access to that, which is one downside, but since you don't have to play any archetype cards for Turles to actually work, you get to just play the best yellow cards in the game. One card I wanted to showcase is Zamasu the Eliminator. Man, this card has had a big, big fall from grace, but it is so good in the blue-yellow variant of Turles for several reasons. One, it actually lets you answer all the deflect boss monsters in the game. So Ultra Mastery, SSB Vegeta Unison, SCR I mean, the 8-drop GT trio. This card is just so good at answering all those. Even the 9-drop Cell and Gamma, very good against that as well. And it's also a good answer to Floodgates. Like, yes, it costs 2, but I mean, let's be honest. In this format, we're going to turn 6, turn 7, turn 8. So if you want to establish an S2 Gohan Z fighter and you want to use a Zamasu Eliminator to answer a Floodgate, that's going to be pretty viable in a lot of scenarios, especially on turn 6. I mean, that's a 5 energy play, assuming you have to establish the unison that turn, and then you have access to all your senzu beans to restand all your energy. So I do have Scott's profile here on the channel. I've got my personal profile on the Patreon if you want to check those out. Definitely do so. And then Hermestyle has the first place mono yellow list. Go check them out. Shout out to those guys as well. But I do definitely recommend Turles as a top rogue pick, and really the only reason it's rogue is because it's had very low representation. Even though the few times it's been represented, it's placed very, very highly. The deck is very, very good. Definitely want to recommend it to you guys. Then we have Beerus Reboot. Okay, so in the video from Wednesday where I talked about the webcam events, I kind of went on a tangent where I talked about the fact that Beerus Reboot might actually be better than SS4 in my opinion. And the main reason is SS4, while it does what it does very well, and if you can hit for damage with those UI Kamehamehas, you're going to be ramping, and it's not going to cost you all that much. It's going to cost you basically 1 energy and no cards from hand to hit that ramp. But the problem is, if your opponent has early negates, early blockers, or just the ability to combo out early, like many decks actually do right now, you're not going to be able to ramp. And if you're playing SS4 and not ramping, you're actually playing the worst blue deck in the game. If you're playing SS4 and successfully ramping, you're playing the best blue deck in the game. So it's kind of like that dichotomy of, you know, if you're winning or losing very, very early in SS4. I've been thinking a lot about Beerus Reboot though, and how I think it could potentially just be better than SS4. Maybe not better in SS4's best case scenario, but in the medium case scenario where SS4 is maybe having a hard time ramping, Beerus might be better. And I think that's due to the fact this deck has its own built-in objection with Whis Destruction's Aid. It's a 1-drop, you play it, you draw, and then you pay 2 to put it in your energy. So it's an objection that actually costs you 0 card advantage, and it's a more consistent form of ramping, which I think is very, very good. If you can play this Whis on turn 1 and it survives to turn 2, which in most cases it's going to survive, only like red can kill this card super early on. Most other colors can't really do that. So if you ramp this on turn 2, you have Boo Unison going into turn 3. That is exceptionally, exceptionally good. One other thing I want to point out too is that SS4 Vegeta has started playing Gogeta Frenzied Burst to start burning the opponent for 4 life at 15 energy. Beerus has that ability built in for 16. And what's really cool too is that you can play the mana dork, I think it's Weskai. You can play her and she'll actually count towards your activate main win condition. Unlike Gogeta, where you have to have the actual energy in your energy pool, all you have to do is tap 16 resources for Beerus to win the game, and the mana dork will count for that. So all those things just lead me to think that Beerus seems real good. I do actually like it quite a bit, so wanted to point out to you guys, and I am personally gonna be tinkering with it more. Maybe I'll bring a list here to the channel or the Patreon soon once I start working on it. But anyways, we have one more deck to talk about, and that is Raditz Reboot. This deck has been doing surprisingly well, did good at Gen Con, did good at the webcam events over the weekend, and I really think this is a watered down Cell Surge. So if you miss hand control, Raditz is probably the deck for you. I think you can go a lot of different ways with it. I think that the leader and the Nappa unison getting around Deborah is actually incredible. Like, that's just the few answers we have to hand control, and with this leader, this unison warping cards out of the opponent's hand, that's very good. You get to search your super combo, Vegeta the Lone Prince, play it for 1, they discard a card, that's really good as well. And the leader's backside is actually pretty solid. Like, getting in there for that triple attack crit is kind of cool in my opinion. But yeah, I had thoughts about this when Cell Surge got hit, that it might just be a decent watered down version of the deck. Of course it's worse off because your top 5 search is very selective, but still a good card in my opinion, a good leader, and a solid hand control strategy, and probably a more fair one as well, where it's not like Cell Surge, you have to give your opponent some life. So in those matchups where leaving your opponent at 8 is incredibly oppressive, this deck can't quite do that, but still you're warping cards constantly, which is very good. So overall, guys, that's what I want to recommend to you. Let me know in the comments down below what rogue decks you guys are playing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.